The dust settled across the canyon like a brown curtain. Sergeant Maya Chen kept her rifle raised as she moved between the rocks. Behind her, 3 other soldiers spread out in formation. They had been tracking the poachers for 2 days through this wilderness, and now they had finally found them. The planet was called Karis 7, a world where dozens of species tried to build colonies. Most followed the rules. These poachers did not. They killed protected animals and sold their parts to rich collectors across the galaxy. Maya hated poachers more than she hated most criminals. They killed for profit, not survival. Movement ahead, her second-in-command whispered through the comm. Private Torres was a good soldier, calm under pressure. Maya signaled for the team to halt. She pulled out her scanner and swept the area. The device showed heat signatures clustered near a cave entrance. 6 hostiles, all armed, but there was something else. A much larger heat signature deeper in the cave. That's a Vraxi, Chen breathed. A big one. Corporal Kim, their alien specialist, moved up beside her. If there's an adult Vraxi here, we need to be careful. They're apex predators. 12 feet tall, armored scales, claws that can cut through steel. Why would poachers want a Vraxi? Torres asked. Their scales sell for thousands of credits each, Kim replied. Their claws even more. Maya felt anger burn in her chest. The Vraxi were protected by galactic conservation law. They were intelligent enough to use tools even if they couldn't speak. Killing one was considered murder by most civilized species. We go in fast, Maya ordered. Priority is stopping the poachers. If the Vraxi attacks, we defend but do not kill unless absolutely necessary. The team moved forward. Maya counted down on her fingers, 3, 2, 1. They rushed the cave entrance. The poachers were so focused on their target that they didn't notice the soldiers until it was too late. Maya's team had the advantage. Weapons fire lit up the cave interior. The poachers scrambled for cover, but they were disorganized and panicked. Then Maya heard it. A roar that made her bones vibrate. The Vraxi burst from deeper in the cave, a massive creature of muscle and fury. But something was wrong. The creature stumbled. Maya saw the wounds across its side, deep cuts that leaked dark blood. Hold fire, Maya shouted. Don't shoot the Vraxi. But the poachers had no such restraint. They turned their weapons on the wounded creature. The Vraxi swung its massive claws, catching one poacher and sending him flying into the cave wall. Another poacher fired a launcher and an explosive round hit the Vraxi's chest. The creature roared again, but this sound was different. It was pain and something else. Desperation. Maya's team eliminated the remaining poachers in seconds. But it was too late for the Vraxi. The massive predator collapsed, its breathing labored and wet. Maya approached carefully, her weapon lowered. Chen, be careful, Kim warned. But Maya could see the truth now. The Vraxi wasn't trying to attack anymore. Its eyes, large and golden, were focused behind it. Deeper in the cave. Maya stepped around the dying creature and saw them. 3 small shapes huddled together in a nest made of dried vegetation. Cubs. They couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Their scales were still soft, their eyes barely open. They made small mewling sounds, calling for their mother. Oh no, Torres said from behind her. The mother Vraxi made one final sound. A low rumble that seemed directed at Maya. Then the light faded from its eyes. Maya stood there for a moment, processing what had happened. Behind her, Kim was checking the dead poachers. Torres was securing the area. But Maya couldn't look away from the 3 cubs. They were crawling toward their mother's body, their small claws scratching against the stone. Command, this is Sergeant Chen, she spoke into her comm. Poachers eliminated. 1 adult Vraxi deceased. We have 3 orphaned cubs at this location, requesting immediate wildlife rescue. The response came back after a long pause. Wildlife rescue is 3 days out. Your orders are to complete your patrol and return to base. Maya looked at the cubs. They were small enough to fit in her arms, maybe 40 pounds each. Without their mother, they would die. Probably within a day or 2. The planet's nights were cold and the cubs couldn't regulate their body temperature yet. Command, the cubs won't survive 3 days. Not your problem, Sergeant. Return to base. Maya felt something harden in her chest. She had joined the military to protect people. To do the right thing. Leaving these cubs to die because of some bureaucratic delay wasn't right. Torres, Kim, help me with these cubs. Kim looked uncertain. Chen, we have orders. I'm changing the mission parameters, Maya said firmly. We're bringing them back to base. Torres moved forward without hesitation. Together, they carefully picked up the cubs. The small creatures squirmed and made distress sounds. Maya held one against her chest, feeling its rapid heartbeat, its claws still too young to retract. dug into her uniform but didn't penetrate. "They're scared," Torres said softly. "Wouldn't you be?" Maya replied. The team made their way out of the cave. Maya's cub started to calm down, perhaps from the warmth of her body. She looked down at its face. Its eyes were starting to open, revealing the same golden color as its mother's. The hike back to base took 6 hours. Maya's arms burned from carrying the cub the entire way. Kim and Torres switched off carrying theirs, but Maya refused to let anyone else take hers. She felt responsible for it. If she had gotten there sooner, maybe the mother would have lived. When they reached the forward operating base, their arrival caused immediate chaos. Other soldiers backed away from the cubs. The base's alien personnel, especially the insectoid Thelm workers, refused to come near. "Those are Vraxi," one of the Thelm technicians chittered. "They're killers." "They're babies," Maya said sharply. "And they need help." She took the cubs to her quarters, a small room she shared with Torres. They laid the cubs on Maya's bunk. The small creatures huddled together, still making those sad mewing sounds. "They're hungry," Torres observed. Maya pulled out her emergency rations. She mixed the nutrient paste with water, making it thin enough for the cubs to drink. She dipped her finger in it and held it to one cub's mouth. The creature licked tentatively, then more eagerly. "It's working," Maya said. For the next hour they hand-fed all 3 cubs. Maya felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly as the cubs' bellies rounded with food. They stopped crying and started to doze off, piled on top of each other. Maya sat on the floor, her back against the bunk, and watched them sleep. She knew there would be consequences for disobeying orders. She knew her commanding officer would have strong words for her. But looking at these 3 small lives, she couldn't bring herself to regret the decision. Torres sat down beside her. "You know command is going to lose their minds. Let them," Maya said quietly. "These cubs didn't ask for any of this. They deserve a chance." Outside, she could hear the base coming alive with rumors about the human sergeant who had brought predator cubs home. Maya closed her eyes and allowed herself one moment of rest. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Tonight, 3 small creatures were alive because she had made a choice. That was enough. Maya woke to small claws digging into her leg. She opened her eyes to find all 3 cubs crawling over her bunk, making hungry sounds. The morning light filtered through the small window of her quarters. She had slept maybe 3 hours. All right, she muttered, sitting up. The cubs tumbled toward her, their movements uncoordinated but eager. She smiled despite her exhaustion. Torres was already awake, mixing more nutrient paste. "They're loud when they're hungry." "They're babies," Maya said, taking one of the cubs into her lap. Babies are supposed to be loud. Feeding 3 cubs took longer than she expected. They were getting stronger, more active. Their eyes were fully open now, tracking movement around the room. When Maya stood up to get more water, all 3 cubs tried to follow her, stumbling over their own feet. The summons came an hour later. Commander Zixtal wanted to see her immediately. "You knew this was coming," Torres said. Maya looked down at the cubs. They had fallen asleep again, this time in a pile at the foot of her bunk. "Stay with them. I'll be back." Commander Zixtal's office was in the Central Command building. The Thelm officer stood behind his desk, his compound eyes reflecting multiple images of Maya as she entered. The Thelm were insectoid beings, their bodies covered in a chitinous shell. They were logical, methodical, and not known for emotional decisions. Sergeant Chen, Zixtal's translator, rendered his clicks and chirps into standard speech. "Explain your actions. I found 3 orphaned Vraxi cubs. They would have died without intervention. I brought them to base for protection. You disobeyed a direct order to return to base without the creatures. I used my judgment as a field officer to modify the mission parameters based on new circumstances." Sixes. Tal's antennae twitched, a sign of irritation. "Those creatures are dangerous. Vraxi are apex predators. When they mature, they will be capable of killing everyone on this base. They're weeks old, Commander. Right now they can barely walk. Wildlife Services will collect them in 3 days. Until then, you will confine them to a secure area. You are not to interact with them beyond basic feeding requirements." Maya felt her jaw tighten. "Sir, they're imprinting. If I stop caring for them now, they'll develop psychological trauma. The literature on Vraxi development is clear about this. I am not concerned with their psychological well-being, Sergeant. I am concerned with the safety of this base. With respect, Commander, they're not a threat. Not now, and not if they're raised properly. That is not your decision to make." You are dismissed. Maya saluted and left the office. Her hands were shaking with anger and frustration. She knew Zixtal was following protocol, but protocol didn't account for every situation. Sometimes you had to adapt. When she returned to her quarters, she found Torres playing with the cubs. He had tied a piece of cloth to a stick and was dragging it across the floor. The cubs pounced on it, their hunting instincts already developing. How bad was it? Torres asked. I'm confined to feeding duty only. We're supposed to keep them locked up. Torres looked at the cubs. The smallest one, which Maya had started calling Ash because of its darker scales, was chewing on the cloth with small needle-sharp teeth. You're not going to do that, are you? Not a chance. Over the next week, Maya developed a routine. She fed the cubs every 4 hours. She cleaned up after them, which was becoming a bigger job as they ate more. She carried them with her whenever possible, despite the growing complaints from other personnel. The cubs were growing fast. Each one now weighed close to 50 pounds. Their claws, while still developing, were sharp enough to puncture fabric. Maya's uniforms were covered in small tears and scratches. Her arms ached from carrying them, but something strange was happening. The ache in her arms was lessening. After the 3rd day, she noticed she could carry all 3 cubs at once for short distances. After a week, she barely felt the strain. Corporal Kim noticed it during a training exercise. Maya had brought the cubs to the exercise field, carrying 2 while one walked beside her on a makeshift leash. Chen, how are you doing that? Kim asked. Those cubs must weigh 100 pounds together. Maya looked down at the 2 cubs in her arms. She shifted them slightly. I don't know. I just got used to it, I guess. Humans don't just get used to carrying that much weight. You should be struggling. But Maya wasn't struggling. Her body had adapted. Every day with the cubs, her muscles had worked to support their weight. Every night, her body had repaired and strengthened. It was happening so gradually that she hadn't noticed the change. The cubs were changing too. They responded to her voice. When she said sit, they sat. When she said come, they came. They were learning faster than any animal she had ever trained. It was almost like teaching children rather than predators. Other humans on the base started helping. Private Chen brought toys she had fabricated from spare materials. Lieutenant Morrison, the base doctor, helped Maya research Vraxi nutrition and development. Even Captain Rodriguez, Maya's direct superior, turned a blind eye to her violations of Zixtal's orders, but the non-human personnel remained fearful. The Thelm workers refused to enter any space where the cubs were present. The Keltharian traders who visited the base kept their distance. Even the Draxian mercenaries, who feared little, avoided the cubs. They don't understand, Torres said one evening as they watched the cubs play fight. They see predators. They don't see what we see. What do we see? Maya asked. Torres smiled. Family. Maya realized he was right. These cubs had become part of her life in a way she hadn't expected. She thought about them constantly. She worried about their health, their happiness, their future. When Ember, the middle cub, had gotten sick from eating something he shouldn't have, Maya had stayed awake all night monitoring his recovery. The cubs slept with her now. They were too big for her bunk, so they slept on a pile of blankets beside it. But every morning, she woke to find at least one of them had climbed into her bunk during the night, curled against her. 2 weeks after bringing the cubs to base, Maya was called to a briefing. She brought the cubs with her, as she always did now. They walked beside her without leashes matching her pace. When she entered the command center, they settled at her feet without being told. Commander Zixtal was there, along with several other officers. They stared at the cubs with obvious discomfort. Sergeant, I ordered you to minimize contact with those creatures, Zixtal said. With respect, sir, that order would have caused psychological harm to developing juveniles. I used my judgment. Your judgment is not... Commander, if I may, Captain Rodriguez interrupted. Sergeant Chen's methods are producing results. Those cubs are docile, obedient, and bonded to humans. If Wildlife Services wants to use them for their breeding program, they'll be much easier to handle this way. Zixtal's antennae twitched rapidly. He was clearly unhappy, but he couldn't argue with the logic. Very well. Continue as you have been. But if there is any sign of aggression, any sign at all, those creatures will be destroyed immediately. Maya nodded. Understood, sir. As the briefing continued, Maya sat in her chair with the 3 cubs arranged around her. Ash rested his head on her boot. Ember leaned against her leg. Cinder, the largest, lay curled beside her chair. They dozed peacefully while Maya reviewed tactical data and mission reports. No one asked if the cubs were heavy. No one asked how she managed them. They had all seen her carrying them, working with them, living with them. To the other humans, it had become normal, but Maya knew the truth. The cubs were heavy. Each one weighed more than 60 pounds now. Together, they were nearly 200 pounds of muscle and claw and teeth. But when she held them, when they rested against her, she didn't feel the weight anymore. Her body had changed to accommodate them. And in changing, she had become stronger than she had ever been before. 3 weeks had passed since Maya brought the cubs to the base. They had grown substantially. Ash, Ember, and Cinder now weighed close to 70 pounds each. Their scales had hardened, taking on the metallic sheen characteristic of juvenile Vraxi. Their claws, once small and harmless, were now formidable weapons that they were learning to control. Maya sat in the command center reviewing supply reports. All 3 cubs were draped across her lap and legs. Ash sprawled across her thighs, his head resting on the edge of the table. Ember was curled against her left side, occasionally shifting in his sleep. Cinder, the biggest, had his front paws on her right leg and his body stretched across the floor. Other personnel had learned to navigate around them. Torres stepped over Cinder's tail to deliver a data pad. Lieutenant Morrison simply smiled at the sight, no longer surprised by anything Maya did with the cubs. The door to the command center opened. A Keltharian in an official conservation uniform entered. He was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and large eyes adapted for low light. His name tag read Inspector Voss. He stopped when he saw Maya and the cubs. His mouth opened slightly in what might have been shock. "You must be Sergeant Chen," he said after a moment. "That's correct." Maya didn't stand. Moving would disturb the cubs, and they had finally settled after a restless morning. Inspector Voss approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the cubs. "I'm here to collect the Vraxi juveniles for transport to the breeding program. They're not ready for transport. That's not your determination to make, Sergeant. The breeding program has been waiting for new genetic material. These 3 are perfect candidates." Maya looked down at the cubs. Ash's ear twitched at the sound of the strange voice, but he didn't wake. "They're imprinted on me. Separation would cause severe psychological trauma. They're animals, Sergeant. They'll adapt." Maya felt anger rise in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "They're not just animals. They're intelligent juveniles who have formed complex emotional bonds. Breaking those bonds would be cruel and counterproductive to your breeding program goals." Inspector Voss circled the group, studying the cubs from different angles. "Aren't they heavy?" he asked suddenly. Maya blinked, surprised by the question. She looked down at the cubs again. 210 pounds of predator were resting on her body. She shifted slightly, adjusting Ember to a more comfortable position. "Not anymore, not anymore," Voss repeated. "Sergeant, those juveniles weigh over 60 pounds each. That's over 200 pounds of weight. Even with human strength, that should be uncomfortable at minimum. I got used to it. You don't just get used to that kind of weight." Voss pulled out a medical scanner. "May I?" Maya shrugged. Voss ran the scanner over her arms and torso. His expression changed as he read the results. "This is impossible." "What is?" "Your bone density has increased by 23% since you arrived at this base. Your muscle fiber composition has changed. Your body has undergone significant adaptation to accommodate constant load bearing." Maya frowned. "That's normal, isn't it? Like how soldiers build muscle through training. Not to this degree. Not this fast. And not with these specific changes." Voss looked at the cubs again, then at Maya. "You've been carrying them every day?" "Most of the day, yes. For 3 weeks?" "Yes." Voss sat down in a nearby chair, his scanner still in his hand. "I've studied human physiology. You're an adaptable species, but this goes beyond normal parameters. Your body has physically evolved to accommodate these juveniles. I'm just taking care of them." "No, Sergeant. You're bonding with them on a biological level. The constant physical contact, the weight training from carrying them, the hormonal exchange from close proximity. Your body recognized them as something important and changed itself to keep them safe." Maya stroked Ash's head gently. The cub made a small, contented sound. "So I'm stronger now." "That's a good thing. It's unprecedented." Voss stood and began pacing. Do you understand what this means? Humans don't just raise other species. You physically transform to accommodate them. You make yourselves into whatever is needed. That's what parents do, Maya said simply. Parents of their own species, yes. But cross-species bonding to this degree? Voss shook his head. I need to delay the transport. I need to run more tests, study this phenomenon. If humans can bond with Vraxi like this, if they can adapt physically to accommodate them, it changes everything we know about interspecies relationships. You're not taking them. Maya's voice was firm. Not today, Voss agreed. But I need to document this. Other species need to understand what's happening here. He approached the cubs again, this time with his scanner set to a different mode. As he moved closer, all 3 cubs woke suddenly. They didn't move from Maya, but their eyes tracked Voss with sudden intensity. A low rumble came from Cinder's chest. They're protecting you, Voss observed. Vraxi don't protect. They're solitary predators who barely tolerate their own siblings. Yet these 3 are exhibiting pack behavior. Maya felt Ember press closer against her side. Ash raised his head, watching Voss with golden eyes. They know you're making me uncomfortable. I'm just observing. You're threatening to take them away from me. They understand that. Voss stepped back and the cubs relaxed slightly. This is remarkable. They're reading your emotional state and responding to it. Vraxi shouldn't be capable of that level of empathy. Maybe you don't know Vraxi as well as you think, Torres interjected from across the room. He had been watching the entire interaction. Maybe they're capable of more than anyone gave them credit for. Voss turned to Torres. How many other humans have interacted with the juveniles? Most of the human personnel. They're friendly with all of us. But they're bonded to Sergeant Chen specifically. Yes, Maya answered. I'm the one who feeds them, sleeps near them, trains them. They're with me most of the day. Show me the training. Maya carefully stood, shifting the cubs off her lap. They followed her immediately, falling into a loose formation around her legs. She led them to an open area of the command center. Sit, she commanded. All 3 cubs sat, their tails curling around their bodies. Stay. She walked away. The cubs remained sitting, though their eyes never left her. Ember, come. The middle cub stood and trotted to her side. The other 2 stayed in place. That's impossible, Voss breathed. Vraxi don't follow commands. They're too independent, too aggressive. They're young, Maya said, and they trust me. She ran through more commands. The cubs responded to each one. They walked beside her, they stopped when she stopped. They even demonstrated gentle mouth control by taking food from her hand without using their teeth. They've learned to retract their claws too, Maya noted. She held out her arm and Ash placed his paw on it. The claws stayed sheathed. It took a week to teach them, but they understand now that claws hurt people they care about. Voss sat down again. He looked overwhelmed. I need to contact my superiors. This changes everything about how we approach Vraxi conservation. You still want to take them? I don't know anymore. Voss rubbed his face. The breeding program needs genetic diversity, but if what you've created here is unique, if this bond is what's making them so tractable, then separating you would defeat the purpose. Maya felt relief wash over her. The cubs sensed her emotional shift and crowded around her, making happy chirping sounds. She knelt and they pushed their heads against her, seeking affection. Not anymore, Voss said quietly, watching them. What? When I asked if they were heavy, you said not anymore. You didn't just mean you got used to the weight. You meant they're not a burden anymore. They're part of you. Maya looked at the 3 cubs, at their golden eyes and sharp claws and armored scales. She thought about the mother Vraxi dying to protect them. She thought about the decision she had made to save them. Yes, she said, they're part of me. Inspector Voss left that evening with promises to return in a week. He wanted to bring xenobiologists to study the bond between Maya and the cubs. He wanted to document everything, to understand how humans could change themselves and the creatures they cared for. That night, Maya lay in her bunk with the 3 cubs piled around her. They were getting too big for this, but none of them cared. She felt their warmth, their steady breathing, their complete trust. Her body had changed to carry them, but more than that, her heart had changed to love them. And in loving them, she had transformed them from simple predators into something new. Something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that chose to be gentle. Inspector Voss returned with 3 xenobiologists and equipment that filled an entire transport vehicle. Maya watched them set up their research station in one of the base's empty storage buildings. The cubs watched too, curious but cautious. Dr. Saren, a Quellan scientist with tentacle-like appendages and a brilliant mind, approached Maya on the third day of their study. The preliminary results are fascinating. May I show you something? Maya followed her to the research station, the cubs trailing behind as always. They were even bigger now, each pushing 90 pounds. Their movements had become more coordinated, more purposeful. They looked like the predators they were meant to be. Dr. Saren pulled up a holographic display. It showed brain scans side by side. On the left is a typical adult Vraxi brain. On the right are your cubs. Notice anything different? Maya studied the images. The cubs' brains showed more activity in certain regions, areas that were dark in the adult brain. What am I looking at? The social cognition centers. In typical Vraxi, these areas are minimal. They're solitary creatures with limited social needs. But in your cubs, these centers are significantly developed. They're processing social information at a level we've never seen in the species. Because they're with people all the time? Not just people. Because they're with you. Dr. Saren changed the display. We monitored their brain activity during separation exercises. When you leave, their stress hormones spike dramatically. When you return, they experience a dopamine release similar to what human children experience with their parents. Maya felt a strange mix of pride and concern. Is that healthy for them? We don't know. This is entirely new, but it's not just psychological. Watch this. Dr. Saren showed footage of the cubs interacting with other humans. They were friendly and playful. Then she showed footage of them with non-human species. The cubs were polite but distant. They've learned to distinguish between species, Maya observed. More than that, they've learned to distinguish between friends and potential threats. Yesterday, a merchant came to the base. He was rude to one of your soldiers. The cubs positioned themselves between him and your people. They didn't attack, but they made their protective stance very clear. That's what pack animals do. Exactly. But Vraxi aren't pack animals. You've created pack instincts in a solitary species. Dr. Saren's tone was filled with wonder. And the physical changes in you are equally remarkable. Your bone density is still increasing. Your muscle efficiency is off the charts. You're carrying over 250 pounds now without showing strain. Maya looked down at the cubs. They need me to be strong. And your body responded. That's what makes humans so unique. You adapt to meet the needs of those you care about, not just psychologically but physically. The research continued for 2 weeks. The scientists tested everything from the cubs' learning capacity to their stress responses. Maya participated willingly, though she drew the line at anything that might distress the cubs. During the second week, the base received an urgent alert. A civilian settlement 50 kilometers away was under attack. Separatist forces had launched a surprise raid. The settlement's defenses were minimal, mostly retired soldiers and their families. Commander Zixtal called an emergency briefing. We're the closest military asset, but we can only spare 5 soldiers. The rest of our forces are committed to operations in other sectors. Maya volunteered immediately. I can lead a team, sir. Chen, you're needed here with those creatures. Sir, that settlement has over 200 civilians, including children. They need everyone we can send. Zixtal's antennae twitched. He was calculating odds, weighing priorities. Very well. But the creatures stay here. Maya almost agreed. Then she thought about the cubs' abilities. They were fast, stealthy, and incredibly perceptive. They could track scents and detect movement better than any human technology, and most importantly, they followed her commands perfectly. Sir, I request permission to bring them with me. The room went silent. Every officer stared at her. Absolutely not, Zixtal said flatly. They're unpredictable predators. With respect, Commander, they're trained and disciplined. They could be assets in the field. Or they could attack civilians and cause an interplanetary incident. Dr. Saren stood up from where she had been observing. Commander, if I may, we've been studying these juveniles for 2 weeks. Their behavior is predictable and controllable when Sergeant Chen is present. If she says they can help, I believe her. You're a scientist, not a military strategist, Zixtal countered. But I understand behavior. Those cubs will do whatever Sergeant Chen commands. If she tells them to protect civilians, they will protect civilians. The debate continued for 10 minutes. Finally, Captain Rodriguez intervened. Sir, we need every advantage we can get. If Chen thinks the cubs can help, let her try. I'll take full responsibility. Zixtal clearly hated the idea, but time was running out. Fine, but Chen, if those creatures harm a single civilian, you'll face court-martial. Understood? Understood, sir. An hour later, Maya and her team were in a transport speeding toward the settlement. Torres and Kim were with her along with 2 other soldiers, and the cubs harnessed with tracking devices and emergency tranquilizer collars that Maya prayed they would never need. The cubs sensed her tension. They pressed close to her in the transport, their warmth comforting. She scratched behind Ash's ears and he leaned into her touch. "You 3 are going to help people today," she told them quietly, "just like we practiced. Protect, don't attack. Understand?" Ash chirped softly. Ember and Cinder echoed the sound. It was their version of agreement. They reached the settlement as the sun was setting. Smoke rose from several buildings. They could hear weapons fire in the distance. The settlement's defenders had fallen back to a central plaza, protecting the civilians. Maya's team moved quickly through the outer streets. The cubs moved with them, silent as shadows. Their natural stealth was remarkable. Even wearing harnesses and tracking devices, they barely made a sound. They encountered the first group of separatists near an abandoned warehouse. 5 hostiles, armed and focused on their advance toward the plaza. Maya signaled her team to spread out. Then she looked at the cubs and pointed. "Flank," she whispered. Silent, the cubs melted into the shadows. Maya counted to 10, then opened fire. The separatists took cover, returning fire. They didn't see the cubs circling around their position until it was too late. The cubs didn't attack. They simply appeared behind the separatists, growling. The sound of 3 Vraxi juveniles at close range made the separatists freeze. In that moment of hesitation, Maya's team moved in and captured them without a single casualty. "Good cubs," Maya praised. Ash's tail swished with pleasure. They continued through the settlement using the same tactics. The cubs would flank, intimidate, and create openings. They never used their claws or teeth. They simply made themselves look threatening, and that was enough. At one point, they found a collapsed building with people trapped inside. The separatists had moved on, but the rubble was too unstable for humans to navigate safely. Maya studied the situation, then looked at Cinder, the largest cub. "Can you get through there?" she asked, pointing at a gap in the rubble. Cinder approached cautiously, testing the stability with each step. His movements were careful, deliberate. He squeezed through the gap and disappeared into the building. Maya heard voices inside, frightened calls for help. 5 minutes later, Cinder emerged carrying a small child in his mouth, as gentle as a mother cat with a kitten. The child was crying, but unharmed. Cinder set the child down near Maya, then went back for another. He made 3 trips, rescuing 2 children and an elderly woman. Each time his mouth control was perfect. Not a single scratch on any of them. The evacuation took 4 hours. By the time the main military force arrived, Maya's team had helped secure the settlement with minimal casualties. The civilians were safe. The separatists had been driven off or captured. As they loaded back into the transport, a woman approached Maya. She was holding the child Cinder had rescued. "Thank you," she said, tears in her eyes. "He saved my daughter." "Cinder saved her," Maya corrected, gesturing to the cub. "Thank him." The woman looked at Cinder with fear and gratitude mixed together. Slowly, she reached out and touched his head. Cinder stood perfectly still, allowing the contact. Then his tail swished and he made a gentle chirping sound. The woman smiled through her tears. "I didn't think Vraxi could be like this." "Neither did anyone else," Maya said softly. "But they can be. They just need someone to believe in them." On the flight back to base, Maya sat with the cubs piled around her again. They were exhausted but content. She felt their steady breathing, their complete trust in her. Dr. Saren had been right. They weren't just trained animals. They were pack members, family members. They had learned to protect instead of hunt, to rescue instead of kill. They had chosen gentleness over violence. And in choosing that, they had become something the galaxy had never imagined possible. They had become proof that predators could learn peace, that instinct could be tempered with love, and that the fiercest creatures could have the gentlest hearts when given the chance. Maya closed her eyes and let herself rest. Tomorrow would bring questions, debriefs, and probably more arguments with Commander Zixtal. But tonight, 3 Vraxi cubs had saved lives. Tonight, they had shown the galaxy what was possible when 6 months had passed since Maya brought the cubs to the base. They were cubs no longer. Ash, Ember, and Cinder were juveniles now, each weighing over 200 pounds. Their scales had hardened into the formidable armor of their species. Their claws could slice through steel if they chose to use them that way. They stood nearly 6 feet tall at the shoulder, and they would grow larger still, but they chose not to be weapons. They chose to be gentle. Maya stood in the observation gallery of the Galactic Council chambers, watching the delegates gather below. Ash sat to her left, Ember to her right, and Cinder lay at her feet. They wore formal harnesses marking them as trained companions rather than wild animals. They held themselves with dignity and calm. Inspector Voss stood nearby preparing his presentation. Dr. Saren was reviewing notes on her datapad. The air was thick with tension. Today's hearing would determine the future of the program Maya and her cubs had unknowingly started. "Are you nervous?" Torres asked. He had come as part of Maya's support team, along with several other soldiers from the base. "Yes," Maya admitted, "but not for me. For them." She gestured to the cubs. "They've done everything right. If the council rejects this, it's not their fault. It's because people are afraid to change." Below them, the council was called to order. Representatives from over 50 species filled the chamber. The Keltharian delegation looked interested. The Thelm, including Commander Zixtal, looked skeptical. The Draxian representatives looked openly hostile. Inspector Voss was called first. He presented 6 months of data, behavior studies, psychological evaluations, incident reports. He showed footage of the cubs protecting civilians, rescuing trapped people, and working alongside human soldiers. His conclusion was clear. The Chen phenomenon, as we've come to call it, represents a breakthrough in cross-species cooperation. Humans possess a unique ability to form bonds that transcend biological boundaries. Through these bonds, they can influence the development and behavior of other species in ways we never thought possible. A Draxian representative stood. "You speak of influence. Others might call it manipulation or even biological warfare." "These humans are changing another species to suit their needs," Dr. Saren responded. "With respect, that's not accurate. The changes are mutual. Sergeant Chen's physiology has adapted as much as the cub's behavior has. This is symbiosis, not domination." "The Vraxi are dangerous predators," another delegate argued. "Even trained, they pose a threat." Maya was called to testify. She walked down to the chamber floor, the cubs following in perfect formation. Every eye in the room tracked them. She heard whispers, saw delegates shift nervously in their seats. "Members of the council," Maya began, her voice steady. "6 months ago, I found 3 orphan cubs. I made a choice to save them because it was the right thing to do. I didn't know it would lead here. I didn't know my body would adapt to carry them, or that they would learn to love instead of hunt. I just knew they deserved a chance." She paused, looking at the cubs. Ash met her eyes, and she felt his trust like a physical thing. These 3 have never hurt anyone who didn't threaten them or their pack first. They've saved lives. They've protected the weak. They've shown compassion and restraint that most people think their species is incapable of. Not because I forced them to, but because they chose to. You cannot guarantee they will always choose peace, the Draxian delegate said. "No," Maya agreed. "I can't guarantee that. Just like you can't guarantee any soldier will always follow orders, or any citizen will always follow laws. But I can tell you that these 3 have proven themselves over and over. They've earned the right to be judged on their actions, not their species." The debate lasted for hours. Maya returned to the gallery to wait. The cubs sensed her anxiety and pressed close. She stroked their scales, feeling the warmth beneath the armor. "Whatever happens," she told them quietly, "I'm proud of you, all of you." Finally, the council reached a decision. The speaker, an elderly Quellan with centuries of diplomatic experience, addressed the chamber. "This council recognizes the unprecedented nature of the human-Vraxi bond. We have reviewed the evidence and heard testimony from multiple sources. Our decision is as follows." Maya held her breath. "The Vraxi juveniles known as Ash, Ember, and Cinder will remain under the guardianship of Sergeant Maya Chen. However, this program will be expanded. We are establishing the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative, with the goal of studying and potentially replicating these bonds with other species and other human guardians." Relief flooded through Maya. The cubs chirped happily, picking up on her emotions. "Furthermore," the speaker continued, "Sergeant Chen will be promoted to lieutenant and assigned as the initiative's field commander. She will have the authority to recruit both human personnel and suitable animals for the program." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. It wasn't just acceptance. It was validation, recognition that what she and the cubs had built together mattered. But there were conditions. The cubs must undergo quarterly behavioral evaluations. Any sign of uncontrolled aggression will result in immediate reassignment to a secure facility. Sergeant Chen, Lieutenant Chen will be held personally responsible for their actions. I accept those terms, Maya said firmly. After the hearing, delegates approached to see the cubs up close. Most kept their distance, but a few brave souls reached out to touch their scales. The cubs accepted the attention with grace, understanding somehow that they were ambassadors now. A young Keltharian child, daughter of one of the delegates, approached timidly. She held out her hand. Ember, who had always been the gentlest, lowered his head and let her touch his nose. The child giggled with delight. "They're nice," she said to her father. Not scary. That moment, more than any testimony or data, seemed to change minds in the room. Later, Maya sat in a quiet garden outside the council chambers. The cubs sprawled around her, finally able to relax. Torres and Kim joined her, along with Dr. Saren and Inspector Voss. "You did it," Torres said, grinning. "You and these three changed the galaxy's mind." "We haven't changed everyone's mind," Maya corrected. "But it's a start. What will you do now?" Dr. Saren asked. "You have funding, authority, and the council's backing. You could build something truly revolutionary." Maya thought about it. She thought about all the orphaned animals across the galaxy, all the species that were misunderstood or feared. She thought about the humans who had the capacity to love and adapt, but had never been given the chance. "We'll find others," she said finally. "Other cubs, other pups, other younglings who need someone to believe in them. We'll show the galaxy that predators and protectors can be the same thing, that fierce and gentle aren't opposites." "That's ambitious," Voss noted. "That's necessary," Maya replied. She looked at Cinder, who was watching a group of children play in the distance. His tail swished contentedly. "The galaxy is afraid of what they don't understand. We're going to help them understand." Over the next months, the initiative grew. Other humans joined, each carefully selected for their empathy and adaptability. They took in orphaned Vraxi, yes, but also other species, predators and prey animals alike. Each human-animal pair developed their own unique bond. But Maya, Ash, Ember, and Cinder remained the standard. The original pack. The proof of what was possible. A year after the council hearing, Maya led her cubs on a mission to a contested border world. They were there to mediate a dispute between two colonies. It was dangerous work, the kind that could easily turn violent. A young officer from the ship's crew watched Maya work. She moved through the negotiations with confidence, the cubs always nearby. When tensions rose, their presence reminded everyone that violence wasn't the only option. When agreements were reached, they somehow seemed to celebrate along with the diplomats. During a break, the officer approached Maya. She was sitting in a command center reviewing security feeds. All three cubs were arranged around her as always. Cinder's head rested on her lap. Ember leaned against her chair. Ash lay at her feet, alert but relaxed. The officer stared. "Lieutenant, those cubs must be heavy. How do you manage them?" Maya smiled. She had heard this question many times now. She looked down at her cubs, at their powerful bodies and gentle eyes. She felt their weight solid and real and comforting. "They're not cubs anymore," she said. "They're juveniles. They're pack. They're family." She stroked Cinder's scales and he rumbled happily. "Are they heavy?" "Yes, but I got stronger to carry them. And they got gentler to be worthy of being carried. We changed each other." The officer nodded slowly, starting to understand. "Besides," Maya added with a grin, "I don't manage them. We manage together." That was the truth that the galaxy was slowly learning. Humans didn't conquer through force alone. They didn't dominate or control. They connected. They adapted. They loved so fiercely that their own bodies transformed to protect what they cared about. And the creatures they bonded with, they transformed too. Not because they were forced to, but because love gave them the freedom to choose who they wanted to be. Ash, Ember, and Cinder could have been killers. Their instincts, their biology,